Good morning. We are here today to discuss Parshiyos, Matos, and MAZAL, which marks the end of Sefer B'Midbar, the fourth volume of the Torah. As we've discussed in the past, this volume of the Torah actually also is sometimes referred to as the sixth volume of the Torah, because Sefer B'Midbar is actually three separate Sfarim from the beginning until Vayhi V'Soah, from Vayhi V'Soah until the end of Vayhi V'Soah, and then from Vayhi V'Soah until the end of the Sefer, which would make three volumes, which would mean that because we are concluding Sefer B'Midbar, that would be the end of the sixth volume of the Torah. Nonetheless, we are here to discuss Parshiyos, Matos, MAZAL, the 9 days, and the title for today's class is called Crafting Identity and Legacy. This month, the month of Tamuz, is dedicated in memory of Doris Lombardi on the anniversary of her Yahrzeit by Brittany and Daniel Lombardi and family. She was a loving and devoted grandmother who made us know we were her world. She lived a joy-filled and passionate life. She was warm and outgoing, left an impression on everyone she met, and always stressed through her words and action the beauty and importance of Judaism and Am Yisrael. Her memory and impact on our lives is a true blessing to our family. We are filled with joy and pride in knowing that we are living lives in line with the values she lived and taught us. And here's a happy, tremendous hashgacha pratis coincidence, by the way, because as we speak, the bris of Daniel and Brittany's son, who dedicated this month in memory of the grandmother that we just spoke about, is ongoing and maybe concluding as we speak. So I do not yet know the name, but a tremendous MAZAL tov to Daniel and Brittany Lombardi on the birth of a son, and may all the blessings that they speak of truly be fulfilled in their family. So in addition to seeing a nechama in general, this new child should also be a tremendous source of nechama and nachas to the family. And I look forward to hearing more about him, as I'm sure we all do, because we know that another son in the Lombardi family is sure to be a great addition to our community and to the Jewish people. This week's class is also dedicated Li'Iluy Nishmas Dovid Tzvi ben Yaakov, a dear friend, alumnus of the yeshiva, Reb David Steingrut, Zecher Livracha. We dearly miss him, and his untimely passing is truly a very, very sad and tragic event for us and our yeshiva community. So, as I mentioned in the title, in addition to Parshiyos, Matos, and MAZAL, is the 9 days. And indeed, this coming Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh, which is the official start of the 9 days, Rosh Chodesh Av. And it always is important to note what is happening in our Jewish calendar and how it might relate to the Parshiyos that we are studying at that time. So the Lombardi dedication is now concluded because this is the end of our Hebrew calendar month. Baruch Hashem, we do have a sponsor for the coming month. If anybody's interested in sponsoring, please let me know. But the reason I bring all that up right now is because as we enter the 9 days, which is the second part of the 3 weeks, I want to discuss the fact that this is an inauspicious time on our calendar, specifically always occurring in the summertime. And I would love to understand the correlation, so to speak, between the 9 days, the 3 weeks, the summertime, and why all of this always happens over the summer. I have a very dear friend who is always leery, wary, not looking forward to this time of year when it seems that, unfortunately, bad things seem to happen. God willing, not so much anymore, but nonetheless. So, thinking about this topic led me to consider that for many of us throughout the world, for many, many decades and maybe even centuries, the summertime has been a time of leisure. And so it led me to think about leisure time and life mission. And here are some quotes. Some of them are unknown. Here's one that is known from Benjamin Franklin. Leisure is the time for doing something useful. This leisure the diligent person will obtain, the lazy one never. And there's a lot to be said for that. But in brief, what Benjamin Franklin is saying is that if you don't make the most of your time, you never truly have leisure time. And even when you have leisure time, the idea is to do something useful with that time. That's Benjamin Franklin. Here's one that is well known, but according to what I saw in my research, nobody knows who originated it. The true character of a man is revealed in how he treats others when he has nothing to gain. That relates to life mission. And in our leisure, we reveal what we value most deeply. Also not sure who says that, but that's a theme that we're going to go on today. And this one is from Arthur Schopenhauer, which is paraphrased, "Tell me what you do with your free time, and I'll tell you who you are." So it seems reasonable to posit that how we spend time, especially leisure time, is important to assess. Additionally, and related, is how we prepare for the end of our lives, right? Because ultimately our lives is just one long block of time, hopefully very, very long, but it is just one long block of time. And what we do with that life directly correlates to what we're going to be doing in preparation for the end of life. And related in terms of this concept of preparing for the end of our lives is the topic of legacy. Parshas, Pinchas, Matos, and Mas'eh, in my opinion, offer fertile ground for this exploration. And I believe Mordechai is pointing out that that's this summertime being leisure time is not true for farmers, which is definitely something to consider. Either way, how we spend whatever leisure time we have is an important discussion. So a summary overview of Matos Mas'eh is going to include the daughters of Tzlavchad, which is going to be the main focus of our discussion, but I just want to briefly outline for us these topics of these Parshiyos, very, very briefly. We have the laws of vows, promises relating to husband and wife and father-daughter. We have the commandment to take revenge from the Midyani people, and that they did so by Pinchas leading a group of 12,000 soldiers that were given over to this mission. They came back. They did not really do the job well. Moshe Rabbeinu became angry with them. Some of the laws of kashering are introduced in our parsha. We also have the splitting of the booty among all the people that went to war with the rest of the nation. We have the children of Reuven and Gad being a very mighty and numerous people looking for cattle ground and then asking for land east of the Jordan. That was ultimately granted to them, together with half of the tribe of Menashe, provided that they would promise to go in and fight for the rest of Eretz Yisrael. We have a discussion of how some of the children of Menashe captured large swaths of this land east of the Yarden. In Parshas Mas'eh, we have the recounting of all of the travels of the Jewish people in this almost 40-year sojourn in various deserts between Mitzrayim and Eretz Yisrael. We have the commandment to apportion out the land of Israel by lottery. We have the names of the leaders that would be taken in to Eretz Yisrael with Yehoshua to conquer and apportion out the land. We have the law of the cities of the Levium and how they need to be kind of distributed among all the Jewish people, plus related property laws for them. We have the laws of the cities of refuge. And then we have the, again, the tribe of Menashe, specifically the heads of the tribes of the family of Gilad, Ben Machir, Ben Menashe, from the families of Yosef, that they spoke to Moshe and to the leader, saying, listen, you commanded that we should give Tzlavchad's daughters the inheritance of Tzlavchad, but if they marry out of the tribe, so then the land is not going to stay with the tribe of Yosef, meaning Menashe in this case, and will ultimately go to whatever tribe they marry. So the Torah says that Moshe said, okay, so the daughters of Tzlavchad should marry within the tribes, and this way the land will not divert to other tribes. And in fact, every girl that's in this situation where a daughter is inheriting because there are no sons, they're required to marry within the tribe. Now we're going to come back and discuss that in detail, and that's what happens in the end. That the daughters of Tzlafchad, Machla, Noah, Chalga, Milka, and Sirsa, they all marry within their tribe of Menashe, and that's how the Torah concludes the Parsha and Sefer B'Midbar, that these are the laws that Hashem commanded, but specifically with this fact of how the daughters are meant to inherit and who they are meant to marry, and specifically the daughters of Tzlafchad. So there's a very interesting collection of topics. We're not going to go through all of them, but I thought it was very worthwhile because it's a lot of ground that we're covering in the Torah. And for anybody who wants, they can go back and think through how what we will talk about is going to relate to other topics in the Parsha, plus some of that may in fact be included in the transcript. Now, here's something very important to know, and it's based on the Talmud, Gemara Bava Basra, page 120b, specifically relating to these laws of inheritance of a daughter when there are no sons to inherit, and specifically relating to the daughters of Tzlafchad, and specifically relating to this first generation of Jews entering Eretz Yisrael, and God willing, this will be included in the transcript. So in Bava Basra, page 120a, the Torah, the Talmud says that even though it says in the sentence here in Mas'eh that these women, the daughters of Tzlafchad, should marry within the tribe of Menashe, they were actually permitted to marry any tribe that they wanted. So even though the Torah seems to say otherwise, Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel that in truth, the daughters of Tzlafchad were, yes, allowed to marry outside their ancestral tribe, outside their father's tribe of Menashe, to any other tribe, whether it be Reuven or Shimon or whatever. Okay? But the Gemara says, the pasuk over here says that any daughter that inherits needs to marry within their tribe. Says the Gemara that was only true for the first generation, and it did not apply to the daughters of Tzlafchad. So that means that this first generation that entered the land of Israel had two separate rules. The main rule was that any daughter that was inheriting from her father because there were no sons needed to marry within their tribe. The second rule is that even though Benos Tzlafchad fall into that category, and it sounds like they were supposed to marry within their tribe, they actually did not need to marry within their tribe, even though they subsequently did marry within their tribe. And the third rule is that this is only true of the first generation. Later generations, it does not matter if the daughter is inheriting the father's ancestral tribe. She does not need to marry within their tribe. It was only the first generation that the daughters were obligated to marry within their tribe. Okay, so that's the conclusion of the Talmud Bava Basra in terms of the laws of our Parshiyos. So here's a couple of questions on the Parsha. It's kind of 5-6 questions, but let's do our best. Number one, why does the story of the daughters of Tzlafchad have such prominence in the sentences? Would not the laws of inheritance plus a brief mention of these women have sufficed? Okay, let the Torah say the rules of inheritance, including these daughters, and just mention, a little bit about Tzlafchad. But the truth is, it's about 30 sentences in the Torah, and that's a lot of real estate. So what is so important about this narrative of the daughters of Tzlafchad? Why do they get such mention? And shouldn't a summary version have been enough? Okay, that's question number one. Question number two. If we look carefully, we already started talking about the daughters of Tzlafchad in Parshas Pinchas, before Parshas Matos. It's a double Parsha this week. Last week, we started in Parshas Pinchas talking about the story of the daughters of Tzlafchad, and they went and they made the request, and Moshe came back with an answer that, in fact, yes, girls will inherit their father if there are no sons. So why not tell us right then that when girls inherit their father, they should stay married into their tribes? Why do we have to wait until Parshas Mas'eh and then have a whole new thing where the leaders of the tribe of Menashe come and say, look, if the daughters of Tzlafchad marry out of a tribe, so then we're not going to be able to keep the property of our tribe within the fold? Why not just tell us this law right away? That's question number 2. Question number 3, as we just mentioned, apparently the daughters of Tzlafchad were not required to marry within their tribe, but they were recommended to do so, right? And yes, they did marry within their tribe. But why in the world would they not be obligated to marry within their tribe like the rest of that generation in the case of daughters inheriting? Also, why is this only true about the first generation, that daughters need to marry within their tribe, but not subsequent generations? Also, is there a reason that the conclusion of Sefer B'Midbar is this discussion of inheriting and the unique story of the daughters of Tzlafchad? And finally, number 5, why is the ancestry of the daughters of Tzlafchad and that they stem from Yosef so significant? 3 times in Parshas Pinchas and here in Masay, the Torah points out that they come from Yosef. We know Menashe. Just tell us if you want to tell us what tribe. Okay, they come from Menashe. Why do we need to go back all the way to Yosef? Now, there's also an interesting Rashi on that earlier in Sefer B'Midbar, chapter 26, sentence 1, plus the verses here mention Yosef as well, but it needs explanation. So what I would like to suggest is that we need to kind of think about the mindset of the daughters of Tzlafchad. My dear friend Joseph Ratman pointed out to me today, he said, what do we think the daughters of Tzlafchad thought would be Moshe Rabbeinu's answer? Right, so they go and they make a very public spectacle of their question. They approach the leadership in a public setting, not only Moshe, but all the leaders, and they make their request on behalf of their father. What kind of a response were they probably expecting? So when Joseph asked me that question, I said, probably no, I would think, especially if we want to believe that Judaism is patriarchal and doesn't give much credence to egalitarian ways of thinking. They probably were expecting a no. Now, I happen to not subscribe to the fact that Judaism is patriarchal, but nonetheless, it would be reasonable that if we assume that daughters do not inherit when there are sons, if there are no sons, maybe they do not inherit. That would be kind of reasonable to think that that would be the case. In addition to that, I pointed out to Joseph, the fact is they were lobbying on behalf of their father, who by their own admission was a sinner. It's true he did not participate with Korach in his rebellion, but he was, in fact, a sinner. So if that's true, there's more of a reason to expect that, maybe this family doesn't really deserve to inherit. Maybe Tzlafchad's daughters would not inherit. So the therefore is that the daughters of Tzlafchad have no reason really to go for this kind of lobbying, because the probability is that they will marry someone, and whoever they marry, they will be with that property of that family, right? And it's common for women to not inherit. So the likely thing for the daughters of Tzlafchad to have done, which presumably was what the rest of the girls of that generation did, is, look, why should we get involved? The fact is that we're probably not going to inherit, so let's just deal with reality and go marry whoever we're going to marry. But the daughters of Tzlafchad take a completely different tack. And as Ari Marinelli is pointing out, they were doing this on behalf of their father, which we argued in these last few weeks, is that they were completely interested in what would be good for their father. And Rabbi Chil, if you look at their question, they're not asking for themselves. They're asking, why should we be deprived and therefore our father be deprived of the name of our father within the family of Yosef, basically Menashe? So my point is that because they were taking up their father's cause voluntarily, this speaks to the value they placed on giving their father a future and a legacy, and specifically it speaks to how they identified themselves and their purpose. Because this type of effort, this type of time, this type of commitment to put themselves in a public setting and make a very uncomfortable request is indeed a measure of how they chose to give themselves over to a cause, and specifically to the cause of their father, and that they were extremely sensitive to the concept of legacy. Because after all, what are they really fighting for? They're fighting for their father's legacy. Now, the rabbis tell this very clearly, also around that same section in Bava Basra, that what the daughters of Salafchad really argued was a very kind of brilliant Talmudic argument. We know that in the laws of Yibum, when a man dies without children, so his wife then becomes married to one of the surviving brothers in order to continue the name of the dead brother. So the daughters of Salafchad said, look, if we are a continuation of our father's name, great, then we should inherit his land. If we are not a continuation of his father's name and we don't inherit a land, so then our mother should be able to marry one of the surviving brothers of Tzlafchad. So which one is it? That was their argument, which is a really beautiful argument. And as we see, they won. And my point is that from here, I think we can learn that a person's ultimate legacy is determined by their voluntary investments of time, how much they're really willing to commit, put themselves in uncomfortable situations, and how much money they're putting into these causes. And I believe that it's in that order. So here it is, very simply said. If we want to understand what our ultimate legacy will be, it will be determined by our voluntary investments of time, commitments, and money in that order. That's what determines who we are now and who we will be remembered and impacting ultimately as our legacy, because that's going to define us. So I decided to do a little chat GPT search on voluntary charitable commitments in real time. And very beautifully, the chat GPT spits out that, number one, the benefits that we feel now when we get engaged in voluntary charitable commitments is a sense of purpose and identity. Look at that. A sense of purpose and identity. That's number one on the list. In fact, they bring a neuroscience note that studies show helping others activates the brain's reward center called a dopaminergic system, enhancing self-worth and mood. Number two is that there's an emotional uplift and immediate joy. Number three, they also talk about, by the way, the release of oxytocin, which is called the love hormone. And it's not actually an abstract thing. You actually feel joyful within minutes. Number three, increased energy and motivation. Number four, social and spiritual connection. Number five, immediate shift in focus from problems. You know, everybody's complaining about the state of the world. Hey, do a voluntary commitment and you'll feel better. There's an immediate shift away from the focusing on the problems. Anxiety drops and perspective expands. It's amazing. Number six, real relationships get stronger. And then they conclude, fascinatingly, with the Jewish view. And they say, Chazal say, tzedakah saves from death. Doesn't only save from death as a merit. On a deeper level, it saves us from a life that feels dead, routine, empty, and isolated. That's another explanation of tzedakah saves from death. So my contention is that in a world where we wander, where we get lost, where we fail, where we don't live up to who we are supposed to be. Does that sound like Sefer B'Midbar, anyone? It should conclude with a focus on the fact that life is short, and we need to think about what we are voluntarily committing for, fighting for, advocating for, and spending time on. Because with all the failures that we have, that will be the measure of our legacy. It's really as simple as that. And so therefore, we go back to our questions. So question number one is, why does the story of the daughters of Tzlafchad have such prominence in the verses? Would not the laws of inheritance plus a brief mention of these women have sufficed? The answer is no, because the daughters of Tzlafchad are the solution to a life where we have not succeeded, where we have wandered and failed, just like their father wandered and failed. But he built a family that understood the importance of family and understood the value of each person in the family, and his daughters fought for his life to have legacy, purpose, and meaning. But here's a fascinating brief dive into history. Let's think for a moment, and this is really to address question number 5, which was, why is the ancestry of the daughters of Tzlafchad and that they stem from Yosef so significant? When Yaakov was giving his brachos to the tribes, and he mentions all of them, and he severely chastises Reuven and Shimon and Levi. And he says about Shimon and Levi, that basically in their gatherings, in their various protestations, let my name not be joined. Let my soul not be a part of that. And the rabbis tell us he was specifically prophesying toward the rebellion of Korach. He did not want to be included in the rebellion of Korach. Plus, he did not want to be included in this immoral straying of the people of Shimon with the daughters of Midian. Those were two things that Yaakov did not want his name included. Why? What is about those two specific things? And the answer that I suggest, and we've spoken about it recently, is that these two things were undermining the entire Jewish people from the inside. To denigrate Korach, to denigrate Moshe and Aharon about the appointment of Aharon, or the status of the tribe of Levi and what their work is supposed to be, and that there's only one Kohen Gadol, was undermining the system from within. And that would be a terrible, terrible perversion of the identity of the Jewish people. Yaakov does not want to be associated with that, as we'll explain. And for the Jewish people themselves to not live up to the standard of moral behavior that the Jewish people are supposed to represent in the world, the dignity of man, and that man is infinite and he has a relationship with the divine, and to not live up to that by consorting with the daughters of Midian and then becoming attached to this disgusting idol worship of Peor. Again, we've spoken about that recently. That would undermine the Jewish people from within. So if we think about it, what is the ultimate legacy of Yaakov Avinu? It is the Jewish people. It is the fact that Abraham did not produce the Jewish people. Yitzchak did not produce the Jewish people. It's only Yaakov that builds the Jewish people, that all of his children, the 12 tribes, are the long-term enduring identity of the Jewish people. That is the legacy of Yaakov. And guess who gets the credit to be the ultimate legacy of Yaakov? The answer is Yosef. Yosef. Eila Toldos Yaakov Yosef. These are the offspring of Yaakov, Yosef. And then the Torah goes into the whole story of Yosef being sold and the brothers. The brothers tried to get rid of Yosef, tried to exclude him, to cut him out from the Jewish people. But what does Yosef do? Double down, triple down, quadruple down on the fact that the only reason that he's in Egypt is to save the Jewish people. That's how Yosef sees himself. So the one who carries forth Yosef's legacy more than any of the other brothers is Yosef. He is the ultimate credit to the legacy of Yaakov in building the Jewish people. And it's his great-great-great-great-granddaughters that the Torah spends so much time on, because they are a credit to the fact that we need to carry forward the legacy of our ancestors. And a really good way to think about this is every child is unique and every person has their unique contribution to the world. But at the same time that every child is considering, every person is thinking, what is my long-term contribution to the world? What should I be spending time doing, voluntarily committing, spending time and money and energy and, as we know, our kishkas on, right? Worrying about and trying to accomplish on. Also, at the same time, what am I doing to make sure that my parents' and grandparents' legacy is being carried forward? What were their causes? Joseph Rackman shared with me a statistic that apparently the children of most philanthropic givers do not contribute to the same causes. And whether that's because they go away from Judaism or they go away from those causes, I don't know. But the Torah's messaging is that we have an obligation to carry forward the legacy of our ancestors. So here's what the Torah is telling us with all these brilliant rules, even though they seem to be a hodgepodge that don't make any sense. When you have people like the daughters of Tzlafchad that put themselves into a very uncomfortable situation where they're likely going to be told no, where people are very keen on knocking people down that are trying to take a public position, as just happened with Pinchas. Even though he saved the Jewish people were denigrating him. And now comes along the daughters of Tzlafchad, who are, these women. Why do they think they should fight for their father who's a sinner? Why are they making waves? Who do they think they are? But they were doing it for the cause of the legacy of their father. The Torah is telling us those are people that we don't need to worry about their contribution to their tribe, because that's what they're trying to accomplish. So whether they marry within their tribe or they don't marry within their tribe, they're going to keep the tribal identity alive because they're committed to that. And the Torah is telling us we have to be committed to our tribal ancestry. And even though it's true that today many of us don't know from which tribes we come, we only know that Yehuda survives and Yamin survives on some level, and Levi survives. We also know that there are many other tribes that have been included. I'm not going to go into that now, but it's true. We don't know specifically, but we do know our families. And we do know that our family values come from ancient times where we had tribal identities, and we have to argue in favor of the uniqueness of our families and our family history as we move forward into further contributions and to further legacy building. So therefore, when it came to the daughters of Tzlafchad themselves, they did not have an obligation to marry within their tribes because they were fighting for their tribe, as the Torah tells us. But the rest of the daughters who said nothing, we need to make sure that the property stays within the tribes, because we want to make sure that when the Jewish people enter the land of Israel, that the tribes are given proper allocation so that the genealogy and the qualities of the tribes will remain within the people. There's no doubt that in the future things are going to get mixed up in the properties of the tribes of the land of Israel, whether it's by sales or by hektish or by who knows what. Many things can happen that will make it that the tribes don't ultimately keep all their ancestral land, even though there are a lot of laws in place to try to preserve. Because the Torah is trying to preserve the identity of the tribes long term, not the property boundary lines, but the genealogy and the kochos, the talents and the attributes of the tribes. That the Torah is trying to preserve. So once the land is inherited per the tribes, and once we make it clear that the law is that the legacy of children should be to carry forward the fathers and their ancestors' tribal lines, then it becomes fine if daughters in the future generations will marry out of their tribes, even when they've inherited, because we've established the importance of tribal identity among the Jewish people. So that's the way I think that we need to understand these laws. Now, the daughters of Tzlafchad, again, were not required because they already put themselves on the line in a very public way, and that we knew that they were going to actually carry forward their father's estate. But here's the thing. It's not enough to have individuals that care. We need to have the collective governing community care. So in Parshas Pinchas, when the Torah talks about the daughters of Tzlafchad and they come and they ask for their father, the Torah only talks about what happens in the laws of inheritance. The Torah doesn't mention anything about the daughters marrying within their tribes. But in Parshas Mas'eh, so the last section of the Sefer, the Torah begins with that the heads of the fathers of the family of Gilad, the son of Machir, the son of Menashe, from the families of Yosef came, and they said, as a collective governing entity, we are concerned about our tribal identity. And that's when the law emerges that the daughters that inherit in that first generation need to marry within their tribes, because that has to come from a sense of communal responsibility. It's not enough to have a family that cares about their legacy. We need to have the community, the leadership of a specific, or in this case, that specific tribe, take responsibility for that legacy. Now, we don't like to get political in our shir. That's true. We're not going to get political. But one thing is very, very clear. There's a lot of extreme right and there's a lot of extreme left, and they're both really bad. Now, what can happen if we move to a country that is only one party in either direction, that spells disaster. Because that's when an authoritarian regime will emerge. What both parties really need, both the Democrats and the Republicans, they need the good parts, they need the tension of the disagreements of both parties in order to keep everyone in line. That's very, very necessary for a democratic process. So by similar fashion, if we don't appreciate and fight for the legacy of every tribe and their identity and their unique contribution, then that corrodes the true melding and blending of what the Jewish people qualities need to be. So just like at the end of Yaakov's blessings, Rashi tells us that Yaakov actually gave each tribe every other tribe's blessing. It became a cumulative blessing, even though they were all given uniqueness, but ultimately all the blessings went to all the tribes. That can only happen if every tribe has a real place and a real identity. If the kochos, the talents that they bring to the table, are really fundamentally appreciated. And that's a huge risk in our United States country today, because if either party gains dominance in a long-lasting way, then that is likely to make it extreme and authoritarian and very, very dangerous for Jews, but also just dangerous for people. As we know, Jews are always the canary in the coal mine. So it's what's happening to the Jews that's then going to happen to all the underprivileged, less advantaged, or less powerful. So Sefer B'Midbar focuses tremendously on the narratives of the daughters of Tzlafchad, but it concludes with the way that the community of Yosef, of the family of Menashe, lobbied for the identity of Menashe and Yosef. That is a huge lesson for us, because we need to not only function as individuals, we need to function as a community. We need to not only function as Jews in South Florida or in the United States of America, but as a national Jewish entity. And we need to fight for our legacy and for our identity. And the way that we can most know who we are building to become is by what we voluntarily commit to, what we spend huge amounts of time, resources, and money on. Then we know the future that we are building for ourselves, for our families, and for our nation. And it's extremely important that we do it not only as individuals, but as a collective entity. And I believe that's why Sefer B'Midbar ends with this unique story, not only of the daughters of Tzlafchad, but with the way that the daughters of Tzlafchad did not need to marry within their tribe, but they did, yes, marry within their tribe, and that the rest of the daughters of the generation were obligated to marry within their tribe. That's the conclusion of how we get to a future people that, God willing, will do much better in the 9 days, and instead of a Tisha B'Av, we'll have a Mashiach arrival. Because the only way to really get there is for our collective energies and identity, uniqueness, strengths, as represented by all the tribes, work together and blend together with the mission of the Jewish people, and to truly make it that the offspring of Yaakov are Yosef and all the tribes, because that will ultimately bring what's best for the entire world. Any questions or comments?
Thanks, Akiva. Even though you didn't talk yesterday like you were supposed to.
Okay.
Bye-bye. See you next week. Are you on next week?
Yes. Yes, God willing, next week.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Rabbi,
Yes, Sir Mordechai.
your announcements went out as 9:30 p.m.
Oh,
and not a.m.
I'm
But
sorry.
it's okay. It's okay. We all figured
Didn't
it out.
realize. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No. We're
Yeah.
not trying to correct. We're just saying, So I was wondering if, since it said p.m. and you're an Ish Emes and an Einikul of Yaakov Avinu, does that mean we get another different share tonight? we look forward to it at 9:30 here tonight.
I hear you. I hope you do, but not for me.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
If you change your mind, let us know.
All right. Sounds good. Martin. Thank you. Thank you. I believe everyone should join my father's Zoom in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to make one point,
Yes.
Rabbi Kiva. If you saw the note I wrote later.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw. It's good. You're saying
Just
they weren't
saying.
obligated, but because they were going to anyways.
They were going to anyway, so you
Yeah.
you don't have to necessarily command them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. And that you just need a reason why, like, that's better. Like, you know.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if you Masuva so whatever.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that you have to get into that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yes.
Hey,
The,
Rabbi.
the farmer of the summer.
Yeah, you see here. Anyway, Rabbi, what was Zelafchat's sin?
We don't know. We
Uh-huh.
don't know. It just says in the Torah, ki v'chet omes, that with his sin he died, meaning his own private sin, not part of these other rebellions.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
so all right, fine.
Yeah. Don't
All
know.
right. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye.
Anybody else, or we're good? Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
there's a Rabbi Litvak, actually Litwak,